Ayan. So let's continue our discussion here in CP12b, module number 4. So on this part of the module here, we will talk about what we call the clipping. Now, when we say clipping in Java 2D API, it's the way on how you restrict, okay, a particular drawing to a certain area. This is done for efficiency reasons and to create various effects. When working with the clip, we must either work with a copy of the graphics object or to restore the original clip attribute. Changing the clip doesn't affect existing pixels and somehow it affects the future rendering only. Now, in the following examples here, we will be clipping an image to a circle shape. The first program that I will demonstrate to you is what we call the clipping program. Now, for the clipping program here, the circle is moving on the screen and showing a part of the underlying image. But then, this example here, I will only create a program that will simply move the circle back and forth lang diagonally. Okay? Maybe later on you would like to consider modifying the movement of the circle. It all depends on you later on. And the other program that we need or that I will be demonstrating to you is what we call the clipping shapes program. We will be having a bouncing circle and rotating rectangle. So this is bouncing, this is rotating, and when these shapes overlap, the resulting area is filled with color. With the set clip method, which I will be discussing later on, we will reset the clip area to the old clip before we can even draw the shapes. Unlike the clip method, the set clip doesn't combine any clipping areas. It resets the clip to the new area. So for this part, we have two different programs. So I want you guys to create here your Java program using Intellij. So open natin yan. Let's create here clippingx.java as our class. So there you go. Clippingx. Let's extend this into JFrame. Then let's go ahead and create our main method. Then let us now go ahead and import the following packages that we need to use. So this part, since we will be using a circle, I would like to use here what we call the dimension, and which will determine the dimension of a specific image and the circle itself. So do not also forget the event queue. Yan. Gagamitin natin in the main method. Yan, magagamit lang natin yung event queue because something will move naman, 'di ba? So java.out.graphics, then java.out with graphics 2D. Yan. We will also have the image. We will also have the event, action event, which will automatically be executed once the program started or executed. So java.out.geometry, we will be using that, and ellipse 2D for the circle. Also the swing dot image icon, which we are doing earlier, and the JFrame, and as well as the Jpanel. Swing the Jpanel. There you go. And lastly, I forgot to add here the timer. Yan, since gagalaw kasi gagalaw yung circle yan. So we need to at least determine the timer of that one. So let's work on the main method. This is actually the execution point. Let's create here the event queue dot invoke later and new runnable, which will automatically create the public void run method. And here is where we will instantiate the object clipping x. Let's name that as this time CL na lang siguro, or at least X, bahala kayo. So new clipping X program. So I would like to set the visibility of this one into true. And okay na. So here on the public class, we have here first of all the constructor, public clipping X. The constructor will now call the init UI, which will automatically serve as the properties of our JFrame. So private void init UI, then we will set the title. Let's name it as clipping example or just simply clipping. Then we will try to pack the entire JFrame later on. we will set the default close operation into jframe.accidentClose. We will set the location relative into null. Now, take note, hindi po ako nag-set dito ng size ng jframe natin. Later on, na lang natin gagawin yan. Kasi kukunin natin ulit yung size ni image. Tapos yun yung gagamitin natin na size. Okay? So here, I would like to add a Jpanel. Pero this time, I would like to add here the panel in which the image will now be contained. So, the image sample here is actually marine image. And so, this might be different on your end kung ano yung magiging pangalan sa inyo nung magiging program mo. Yan. So, okay na tayo. This is actually Jpanel. So, let's create here a separate class, marine image. There you go. Then, let's extend Jpanel into this one para mawala agad. Yun. Diba? Then, since we have an action listener, it's important for us to implement the action listener. Now, for the action listener, let's go ahead and create here the override annotation for the public void action perform. Yan. Tapos, lagay natin dito yung action event E. And, gawa mamaya tayo ng mga methods. Now, once na nag-run si program, this will automatically be executed as well. And, let's not forget to override the public void paint component. And, graphics G. Tapos, sa loob ni paint component here is where we will call the paint component method G, and we will transfer the G into the do drawing method. So, alam naman natin na si do drawing method, siya po yung laman ng lahat. Di ba? Okay, so, gawin natin si do drawing. Let's simply perform the basic thing that we can do here. Do drawing. Tapos, graphics G. This is actually where we will cast the graphics 2D G2D is equal to open close parenthesis graphics 2D tapos G.create. So, casting po yan, di ba? Now, on this part, mas maganda siguro muna kung stay natin dito to because kukontinue natin. I am planning here to at least create the clip and at the same time the image. Pero later on, gawin natin yan. First, let's focus muna sa mga sa mga variables na kailangan natin gamitin. And, of course, doon sa constructor natin. So, we have the constructor marine image, yan, in which we'll simply load up the following methods. First of all, we will try to load the image, yan. We will also be determining and setting the image size. So, separate method po siya. And, we will have to also initialize the timer. So, init timer. So, sa taas niyan, i-declare na rin natin itong mga variable natin. Number 1 is actually the position, initial position of your circle. I'll name that, or yeah, siguro, ano lang yan, pos underscore x tapos equals 8. We also have here the position underscore y, which is 8. Hindi siya totally 0, hindi siya totally nandun sa corner. Yan. So, we will also need to declare the radius. Yan. Radius of the circle. Tapos, si delay. Parang yung ginawa rin natin nung last. Siguro mga 35 lang yan. 35 milliseconds. We will also use the timer object. Yan. And the image object as well. Okay. Now, this part here, I would like to create a variable, delta. Yan. Which is in array. That will simply serve as yan, as the position of the circle as it moves. So, tignan natin mamaya kung ano ang gagawin nito. So, for now, ilalagay ko muna yan na delta array and I'll store a 2 value of delta 3 and delta 0, position delta 0 as 3 and position delta 1 as 3. So, for now, ganyan muna siya. Alright, now, let's work on the load image here. So, the load image, as we all know, we already know how to do it. We have private void, load image. Tapos, we have here image, that new image icon. Then, the position of your image here. Tapos get image. There you go. Diba? So, okay na to. Now, let's try to determine the size of course, your image. So, we have private void, determine and set image size. Then, let's set the height as image. Let get height. This. Tapos, int w image. Let get width. Okay. Tapos this, reference to itself. Now, we will be setting the size of the Jpanel and we'll be using the dimension. Kukunin natin yung size kasi ni height and width. Tapos, ilalagay natin yan as the size of the Jpanel kung saan siya nakalagay. In which case, the Jpanel is added automatically to the JFrame in the main method or the first class na ginawa natin. So, lalagay natin dito si value ni width and height. Automatic. Lastly, we will work on with the timer. For the timer, it's like what we did earlier, private void, init timer, tapos ganyan. I'll set the timer here as, yan, instantiate ko muna, initial value of delay, and a this reference to itself. That's actually a parameter of that one, built-in po yan. Yan, timer.start. So, ganyan. So, init timer. So, okay na to, no? Now, the question here is that, ano ang next na gagawin natin? I can just simply continue working on with the do drawing, yan, in which, sa do drawing kasi, ilalagay ko dito si draw image, yan, ipapasok ko yung image na sinet natin, and their position, and the referencing. Tapos, i-dispose din natin siya afterwards. Ganun siya. Pero, since meron tayong clipping na mangyayari dito, I would like to use what we call the clip method, in which you will simply declare or create a new ellipse with a parameter which is the initial position of x and y and the radius or the size of the circle itself. So, ganyan po siya. Nagets ba natin? Ito, draw image pala to. Ayan. So, ganyan muna si do drawing. Let's try to work on here the public void action perform method. Again, this will be the number one thing that will be executed once the program started running. So, pupunta yan dito kasi nga nag-implement tayo ng action listener dito. So, automatic. Lahat ng mangyayari dito sa action performed kasi walang trigger, walang click, 'di ba? So lahat automatic once na nag-run. Dito magaganap 'yan. So first of all, let's create here what we call the move circle method. Ayan. Tapos si repaint which is automatic. The move circle method here, as the name implies, this is the way on how we make our circle move, yan, from one point to another. So ano nga ba yung i-move natin? First of all, kunin muna natin si width ni circle. Tapos kunin din natin yung height ni circle which was identified earlier and as ito as the radius. Diba? Now, if the position x of the circle is less than 0, ibig sabihin, kapag ka nag-negative na yan, the value of the first delta which we declared earlier will be random. Okay? Will be random. So, mag-generate yan ng random values. Tapos, i-modulo by 4 natin yan. Plus 5. What does it mean? This is actually the position, the first position of your delta. So, whatever number na lumabas dito, say for example, lumabas dyan is 8. 8 modulo 4 is 0 plus 5. So, the value here is, so 8 modulo 4 is 0 plus 5. Yan. So, 9. The first value of delta, position 0, will now be 9. And as the program goes by, tapos hanggat mag-reach siya ng particular condition dito, it will always change to the point na gagalaw si circle na pag ganun. Pa-position ng pag ganyan. So, tignan natin. So, meron din tayo kasi ditong else if. For as long as the position of the x here is like more than the width minus the radius. Ayan. Okay, minus the radius. Ano mangyayari dyan? Oops. Mali yung pinaglagyan ko nito. Dito pala, sorry. Dito. Ayan. Sa move circle pala dapat. Ayan. So, gawa tayo dyan. The value of the delta 0, once again, will be the negative value of math.random. Tapos, modulo 4. Yan. Plus 5. Pero this time, ano lang yan ni-negative value mo lang kapag kayong position x ngayon is greater than the size, the width of the circle minus the radius. The width of the circle so far is set as actually, nasan pa yung pagsiset natin dito ng width ng circle natin? Mamaya, titignan natin yan. Dito yan Ayan. So, radius is 50 and 50 position. So, the position here, for as long as the position x is greater than the width, which is actually 50, kasi di-declare natin yan as 50 and 50 rin dito, di ba? Minus radius, something will happen and it will automatically negate that value. Tapos, another if statement here, which is actually the same lang, pero this time the position y. Pero if the position y is greater than, less than 0, ano ang mangyayari? This time, the delta value of 1 will now generate a random value. Tapos, modulo 4. Ito kasi given to So, dito nadidetermine yung paggalaw ni circle natin. Then, for as long as the position underscore y minus radius. Yan. So, this time, height naman ngayon. Minus radius. What will happen? The value of the delta, position 1, will automatically negate the value of whatever number will produce from the math.random. Yan. Modulo 4 plus 5. And lastly, let's try to set the position of the position x of the circle into delta 0. And the position of delta y as delta position 1. Yan. So that's actually how you create a program here na mag-move si circle from time to time. So may kulang pa tayo dito. I missed here an open and closing parenthesis. Ayan. Tignan natin. There you go. So, kung napansin natin, ayan, umiikot yung circle natin. No? Nagbabounce siya back and forth lang. Kasi nagset tayo dito ng absolute values ng positive and negative lang. So, if you would like to at least change the positioning of the circle here, or the moving, you can just simply play around with the values here. So, that's how you create a program that will simply clip out. Okay? Or will simply move the image here. Now, try nyo baguhin yung shape dito. And try nyo baguhin din yung image. And see what will happen. Alright, next. So, proceed tayo dito sa may clipping shapes program. No? Again, umiikot ito The circle is bouncing. And itong rectangle is nagro-rotate. So, tingnan natin on how does it actually work. So, gawa tayo dito ng clipping shapes X na class. So, public class. Yan. Public class clipping shapes X, and let's automatically extend the JFrame as usual. Public static void main string args. Then this time meron tayong event queue, tapos i-invoke later natin new runnable public void run, and let us now instantiate the object clipping shapes X is equal to new, let's name that as new clipping shapes X, tapos let's set the visibility as true. Ayan. So, syempre, mag-error pa yan kasi wala pa tayo ditong JFrame. So, para mas madali, iyan lang natin to. Javax.swing. Siguro alam niyo naman na yung mga magpapakita dyan, di ba? Na ano natin. Or particularly kung ano yung mga gagamitin natin ng packages dito. So, ganyan na yan para at least umiksi na konti yung code natin. So, gawa tayo dito. Okay na yung main method. Here on the public class is where we will be creating, again, the constructor that will automatically call the init UI method in which we will create init UI. Tapos dito, I'll set the title as clipping shapes. Tapos, would like to set the size this time. May size na po tayo. No need for us to use an image here, just simply shapes. Tapos yung close operation natin is the same. Tapos the location relative to null. So, add tayo dito ng Jpanel, which is the taas ko to. Add new surface shape. Sabihin natin ganyan. Okay? So, surface shape, i-declare natin dito sa labas. Class surface shape. Ayan. Extends Jpanel, which we will add. Ayan, okay na. So, alam naman natin na mag-work na yan, no? Now, we also have here the action listener, kagaya rin ng ginawa natin kanina. So, we need to implement an action listener kasi gumagalaw yan. Yan. So, we have here the override annotation for the action performed. Yan. Override. Tapos private void action performed. Action event. E. And then not really private kasi action listener pala yan. Yeah. So, meron tayong step method here. Gaya rin na ginawa natin. And the repaint. Pero, we will work on with the step method later on. Mamaya yan. So, parang ganun din eh. Kasi, pagagalawin natin si circle. Diba? So, override. Now, what's next here? The paint component. Diba? I-ano rin natin yon. I-override din natin si paint component. Yan. Ano yan? Public void paint component. Graphics G. Tapos super that paint component. Okay. Lagay natin dyan si G. Then we will call the do drawing G. Alam na siguro natin yan, no? Now for the do drawing, we have here private void do drawing. Tapos si graphics G, in which will automatically be casted out as graphics 2D. Oops, I forgot the graphics 2D. Tapos G. Kahit wag nang create kasi shapes lang naman eh. Ayan. On this part, meron tayong isa-set dito later on ng mga bagay-bagay, especially the clipping, the rendering hints, tapos yung circle natin, and basta yung dalawang shape natin. Dito natin lalagay yan sa do drawing. Pero let's work on first with what we call the constructor. Diba? So, we have public surface, shape. Sa constructor kasi natin na to, tawagin natin si timer. So, importante na alam natin si timer na yan. Tapos si timer, private void, init timer, have the following. Oops, I forgot to declare first the following variable na kailangan natin. Private timer, private double rotate, yung pag-rotate ng circle and rectangle. Tapos the position, and position underscore x, which is initially S8. Yan. Tapos si position din ni y is 8 din. Tapos yung movement natin initially as position 1, 1. Tapos, si radius ng circle natin, which is this time 60. Yan. So, meron na tayo ditong sa timer. Now, for the timer, just like what we have done earlier, we will just simply be instantiating a new object timer. Kagaya yan. Timer is equal to new timer. Then, this. Timer, let's start. Alright. So, ganyan siya. Wala ng problema dyan, di ba? Now, ang medyo challenge dito is how we will actually try to make the circle move. So, let's focus first our program kung paano ba natin gagawin si circle and si rectangle na nag-move siya. Pero, for now, ganyan muna. Okay, so, dito sa do drawing, first of all, we will set the rendering hints, yung quality ng render hints natin. So, rendering hint, rendering hint, ayan. Gamitin natin si rendering hints, that key underscore anti-aliasing, then rendering hints, that value underscore anti-alias on. Tapos, ito, nagawa naman natin to noon pa, di ba? Another rendering hint here is the key rendering. Yan. And the rendering hints, this time, render quality tayo. Yan. Render quality, nakaganyan. Next, okay, ito. I would like to use here the shape object in which is inside the out package. Yan. Shape object. We have the old clip. Yan. g2d.getClip. Mamaya, it will play a big role. So, I created here an old clip. Okay. Tapos, the width, we will be setting the width of that one and the height of that one as initial values for now. So, gawin natin si rectangle. Yan. We have new rectangle 0, 0. Position niya is 200. Tapos, 80 yung size. Yan. Rectangle rec. Alright. So, tingnan nga natin kung mag-run ito. Yan. So, sa ngayon, nag-run. Pero, syempre, wala pa siyang laman. Diba? So, kasi hindi pa natin totally nilalagay si, si rectangle natin, in which we will try to do as well. Pero, kagandahan na ito, since rectangle object kasi yan directly, mas madali yang mapagalaw later on. So, in order for us to do that, we have here what we call the Affine Transform. Yan. Ang ginagawa nito, it will simply use the following method. So, we can just simply rotate the rectangle. Yan. So, i-rotate natin yan into the value here, which is, ano yung value ng rotate? 1. Yan. I-rotate natin yan. Tapos, the width and height divided by 2 as the vector positions ng rectangle natin. So, makikita nyo, umiikot yan later on. So, kapag ka-translate natin yan, it will automatically go ahead and divide the width of the rectangle by 2. Oops. Kumbaga yung gitna niya, minus the 100 and minus 40. So, tingnan natin kung gagana yan. Yan. Siyempre, wala pa. Diba? So, titignan natin yan. We will actually try to make everything work once na gumalaw na yan eh. Kasi, automatic, it should, later on, kapag kakompleto na, syempre, gagalaw dapat yan. Diba? So, okay na tayo sa rectangle. Let's focus naman sa ellipse 2D. I'll name that a circle. So, for the circle, yan, we have here new ellipse 2D. Dot double. Yan. The position, which is, kung anong sinat natin kanina. The position Y, and the radius. Kung natatandaan nyo, gantong-ganto yung ginawa natin kanina. Diba? Yung sa clipping. So, next is we will have a general path to that one. New general path. Tapos, ang path niyan kasi will now be dependent on the transform shape ni rectangle. Yan. Tapos, saka natin siya i-clip ngayon. Yan. I-clip natin si circle. Saan natin siya i-clip? Kay path. Tapos, let's set the paint as new color. Siguro random lang na gray ito. Yan. Tapos, i-fill natin ngayon si circle. And, let's set the clip now as the old clip, which was created earlier. Tapos, i-draw natin, which is circle. Draw path. Ayan. So, marami tayong ginawa, no? Clean up natin si circle, clean up natin din si path, sinet natin yung color, na-fill natin si circle, nag-set tayo dito ng old clip, which is actually the shape itself, and we draw the path. Tingnan natin kung gagana na yan. Ayun, may error pa. So, new color dito, and dito. Oops, dito. Ayan. Ayan. So, kung napansin nyo, nagpakita na. 'Di ba? Sa circle, ayan. Yan yung circle natin. We also have here the rectangle. But then, it doesn't actually work at all because of the main reason na hindi pa talaga natin ini-implement si action perform. Gagana yan or iikot yan once na ginalaw na natin dito si action perform. Now, in order for us to do that, kasi ang iikot yan is si ito eh. So, habang umiikot yan, gumagalaw din ito. So, there are actually two happenings na nangyayari while the program is running. So, in order for us to do that, we can just simply go ahead and go to the step method. Ito. Tapos, gawin natin si public void step method. Yan. So, parang yung ginawa rin natin kanina, just like the steps on what we did earlier, we get the width. Dun sa previous program natin, ha. We get the height. Tapos, yung rotate value mo will automatically be +1. So, nag-rotate yan. Umiikot-ikot na siya. Now, for as long as the position X is actually less than 0, for example. Yan. So, the position of delta 0 will now be overridden into position of 1. Otherwise, the position of X is greater than basically the radius. And we will try to negate the value of delta 0. Para mag-create lang siya ng illusion, nag-negative positive lang siya. So, ganun din kay Y. If the position of the Y is less than 0, the position of the delta position 1 will now be automatic 1 din. And tapos si else if natin dito is the position underscore Y greater than the height and the radius. Position ni delta 1 is of course negation lang yan ni 1 itself. And lastly, we will try to position and delta 0. Kunin natin yung position ni delta 0 and yung value ni delta y. Ayan. Okay, so let's try to run the program. Ayan, no? So, kung napansin nyo, umiikot si rectangle. Base yan dito sa rotate na to. Okay. Tapos, si position naman ni circle is actually rotating back and forth. It's because of this positions. Ayan siya. So, parang alam mo yung logo ni Samsung. Diba? Yung Samsung logo. In order for you to recreate that, this code will actually do that. Yan. Pero, ang Kaibahan lang ng program na to is the way on how we clip the circle and the rectangle itself, in which will happen or is happening inside this code, which is the clipping. Ganyan po siya. So, kapag ka nag-clip, sineset mo yung paint into gray. So, you can go ahead and change the color here para makita nyo yung difference ng clipping methods natin. So, dito po yun. Any questions so far? Alright, none. So, let's continue our discussion dun sa my next part natin.